Kaiba is always going to be second place to Yugi. Even with him having more money, more aura, and a cool jet, he's missing something Yugi will always have over him, the King of Games title. The question is, does his deck line up with that statement? He has some of the most broken cards in the anime, yet his decision making with his decks have been a bit off. We've already been over his Duelist Kingdom and Battle Sea deck, so today we'll be breaking down the remainder of the arcs with how good Kaiba's deck actually was, to examine what went wrong or right with his decks. Here's something I didn't know until recently. Even when you're just browsing or streaming an episode of Yu-Gi-Oh!, your personal data can still be tracked or stolen through phishing links or fake websites. In fact, it's one of the most common cybersecurity threats online, and most people don't even realize how exposed they actually are. And funnily enough, while researching this video, I wanted to rewatch some classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Episodes, but since I'm from the UK, the entire original series is blocked on my favorite streaming platform. That's where today's video partner, NordVPN, comes in, because it actually solves both problems at once. With NordVPN, I can change my virtual location in just one click. So if something's available in another country, I just connect to a server there, refresh the page, and it's instantly accessible. And it's not just about access, it's also about protection. NordVPN's Threat Protection Pro blocks malware, phishing links, and even fake web stores trying to steal your info, all while keeping your connection private. To try it out, head to nordvpn.com/monoanalysis. This is the best deal right now, and that's exclusive for creators, where every purchase of a 2-year plan comes with 4 bonus months on top, and it's completely risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. So whether you're revisiting classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Episodes or just want a safer, more private internet experience, click this link below, grab the offer, and enjoy browsing without limits. Halfway in between Battle City, there was a filler arc, which can basically be summarized as a crash course into Kaiba's unresolved childhood issues, where the game format slightly changes, and we see a completely new deck that Kaiba would yield. The biggest change is the addition of Deck Masters, a special new mechanic where each player could choose any monster from their main deck or fusion deck, which would give each duelist their own set of benefits during the duel. These monsters can't be interacted with unless the player chooses to special summon their own deck master to the field, the caveat being that if at any point this deck master is taken off the field, then the player automatically loses, ignoring their number of life points, barring some exceptions where the previous deck master gets tributed for another monster, where that monster now becomes the new deck master. As choosing an appropriate deck master is also a key part of the deck building process, we'll be evaluating Kaiba's choice of a deck master, of which Kaiba used a total of 3 over the course of the arc. Lord of Dragons would let you pay 500 life points to special summon 1 dragon type monster from your hand, but would still require the tributes if it was level 5 or higher. Kaiser's Seahorse lets you normal summon light monsters with 1 less tribute than required, and Blue Eyes' deck master ability would let any fusion monster summoned using it attack the turn it was summoned. We have to kind of reverse engineer the deck master ability because unlike card effects, they never bother to show the full text for the abilities. As such, some of these effects are approximations or guesses to what the full effect is. Lord of Dragons' deck master ability is pretty useful. Being able to summon a Luster Dragon turn 1 with any tribute monster is pretty broken, and with this increase in tempo places you in a much more favourable position. A thing to note though is that you'll still need to have the required tributes if you're summoning something like Blue Eyes. Kaiser Seahorse is also a pretty solid deck master. Being able to summon Hyozan Ryu, Different Dimension Dragon, and Blue Eyes and Kaiser Glider for 1 less tribute is a pretty powerful ability. The only issue is that the deck's only viable light cards were all the monsters I listed, and if the deck was constructed towards being built for the deck master, this deck master could be abused in pretty broken ways. The other deck master that Kaiba used is kind of a weird one. Kaiba did technically choose Blue Eyes as his deck master, but rather a simulated version of Kaiba. And we also never get full confirmation of Blue Eyes' ability as a deck master, as all we are given is that when Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon was summoned, Kaiba's deck master ability would let Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon attack the turn it was summoned. What is unclear is that with the deck master rules, as Blue Eyes was used for a fusion material for Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, we don't know if fusion monsters being able to attack the turn they are summoned is through Blue Eyes' ability or Ultimate Dragon's ability. Assuming it is base Blue Eyes' deck master ability, it makes it pretty useless. As we all know, summoning Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon is a feat by itself, so the ability of being able to attack the turn it's summoned is barely ever going to come up. That being said, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon was summoned on turn 1 of the duel, letting Kaiba attack, even on the very first turn, which theoretically means you can FTK your opponent. Still, it's not a very good deck master ability regardless, as the chances of getting all 4 cards in your starting hand are near impossible. Now that we've gone over the deck masters that Kaiba uses, I think the better way to evaluate how good they are is actually to compare it to other deck masters we see in the arc. The power of deck masters widely varies. For example, taking a look at Yugi's deck master with Dark Magician addition, it lets him activate any previously used spell card this turn again by paying 1000 life points. Whilst it can be conditional, just imagine using this ability after a card of demise, or Judge Man's incredibly broken effect which let you pay 1000 life points to remove from play all monsters your opponent controls, and also inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each monster removed. So is Kaiba's choice of deck masters the best ones? No. Given that he had access to the entire database, ignoring mythical cards like the gods, he could have just chosen a deck master like Judge Man, never summon it, and only use its ability, or even having a deck master be something like 5-headed dragon would have secured him the duel in so many cases, as he could have just summoned it if the opponent had an empty board to go for game. Moving on to Kaiba's actual deck, we see a bit of overhaul of the composition. This time there's a much bigger focus on dragon monsters in comparison to Battle City, with a bunch of new support for them, and of course the removal of Kaiba's Obelisk. There's only 2 new normal monsters, both of which are again in the upper echelon of normal monsters in the entire anime. Luster Dragon 2 is a 1 tribute monster with 2400 attack, which makes it better than Red Eyes, and Zoa is a 2 tribute monster with 2600 attack, which also makes it stronger than Dark Magician. Twin-headed Behemoth is a level 3 Dragon Wind monster with 1500 attack and 1200 defense. If this monster is destroyed and sent to the grave, this monster is special summoned with an attack and defense of 1000 during the end phase of this turn. This effect can only be used once during the current duel. This is a decent card for Kaiba's deck, mainly because it's useful tribute fodder. It can be used as a good wall for turn 1, then set up for a tribute for a more powerful monster the following turn. Vampire Lord is a level 5 Dark Zombie monster with 2000 attack and 1500 defense, and every time this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent's life points, you can declare 1 card type. Your opponent selects 1 card of that type from their deck and sends it to the grave. If this card is destroyed and sent to the grave by your opponent's card effect, it's special summoned to the field during your next standby phase. This might be going against the grain here, but the mandatory of sending cards to the grave isn't that great. It can give them the opportunity to basically deck thin and remove any bad cards. The stats on this card are also a bit underwhelming for Kaiba's deck, given how other 1 tribute monsters have better stats or even better effects. What is pretty strong, however, is the revival effect from effect destruction, which along with its 2000 attack can mean it can be pretty annoying to deal with. The Wicked Worm Beast is a level 3 Earth Beast monster with 1400 attack and 700 defense, and if this card is face up on the field at the end of the turn, it's returned to the owner's hand. For a first proper stinker of a monster, this is just bad. There's no real reason to even run this card in the first place. There already exists enough monsters now with better stats. Its effect is also just straight up bad, if not self-sabotaging, given that it forces you to set a card with a measly 700 defense points, as otherwise you're left defenseless. Spirit Ryu is a level 4 Wind Dragon monster with 1000 attack and defense, with the following effect. You can only activate this effect during the damage step when this card battles. You can discard any number of dragon type monsters from your hand to increase this card's attack by 1000 for every dragon type monster discarded. At the end phase of this turn, this card's effect was activated, this card's attack is decreased to its original attack. So basically you get to go -1 to gain 1000 attack points for a single turn. Getting a 2000 beat stick for a turn isn't good enough to justify its existence in a deck, especially when in most cases it's just an 1000 attack monster. If you've enjoyed the series, make sure to subscribe. I'm still a pretty small channel, so when you subscribe it lets YouTube know that you want to see more of my videos, and makes it more likely that my videos show up in your recommended feed, and also lets me know that this is the kind of content that you want to watch. Spear Dragon is a level 4 wind monster with 1900 attack, where it deals piercing damage, and if it attacks, it changes to defense position at the end of the damage step. Spear Dragon is a pretty powerful card. In most cases it's one use, but 1900 beater with piercing is still pretty useful. Slate Warrior is a flip fiend wind monster with 1900 attack and 400 defense. One flip, increase the attack and defense of this card by 500 points, and anytime a monster destroys this battle, the stats are decreased by 500 points. Slate Warrior is probably one of the best level 4s in Kaiba's deck. For starters, even without its effect, its stats place it in the upper tier of level 4s for the deck. It has a very interesting design with its effect though, as it has a risk or reward style of use. You can place it in defense position to let it potentially get 2400 attack at the risk of its low defense points, or just leave an attack for the still admittedly powerful 1900. Even if it does get destroyed, a 500 stat debuff is still something that's useful. Possessed Dark Soul is a level 3 Dark Fiend monster with 1200 attack and 800 defense, where you can tribute this card, take control of every level 3 monster your opponent controls. Possessed Last, Dark Soul is another monster that doesn't work at all. Its stats are too low, so you're left with a monster where its only use is its ability. But its effect also fails, given the relative scarcity of level 3 monsters. Giant Germ is a level 2 Fiend Dark monster with 1000 attack and 100 defense, and when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the grave, inflict 500 damage to your opponent. Then you can special summon any number of Giant Germs from your deck and face up attack position. Pretty powerful card, as it can be used for a wall or let you set up for Blue Eyes. The problem is, well, Kaiba only runs 2 for some reason in this arc. Giant Germ was played in 2 different duels, and for both games, Kaiba only summoned 2 out, so unless he chose to arbitrarily leave the last copy for later, Giant Germ can't even be used for an easy Blue Eyes. Regardless, it's still a useful card to set up for tributes. Cave Dragon is a level 4 Wind Dragon with 2000 attack and 100 defense, where if you control another monster on your field, you can't summon Cave Dragon, and if there are no dragon type monsters on the field, this card cannot attack. Cave Dragon is a good card. A normal summonable 2k beater is still a valuable monster, even if it has heavy restrictions, and once it's set up, the restrictions for it to be able to attack and won't need continuous resources like a card such as Panther Warrior, so all around it's a valuable card. Different Dimension Dragon is a level 5 light dragon monster with 1400 attack and 1500 defense, with the effect that spells or traps cannot destroy this card, unless the spell or trap specifically targets it. This card also cannot be destroyed by battle. This card is one of the best walls in the deck. Having battle protection and spell and trap destruction means it's close to uninteractable for the opponent. It could have better stats of course, but it's still a solid 1 tribute monster. Ancient Lamp is a level 3 wind spellcaster with 900 attack and 1400 defense. When this face down defense position card is attacked by your opponent's monster, you can make one of the opponent's monsters be attacked instead. While this card is face up on the field, you can special summon 1 Lajin and Mystical Genie of the lamp from your hand. Whilst it has a cute lore effect of quite literally summoning a genie from the lamp, it's incredibly mediocre. The best use of this card is a 2-card combo to special summon a 1700 beater from your hand. It doesn't even let you special summon from the deck, which really hurts its consistency. The redirection attack effect is definitely useful, also can be outplayed if the opponent only has a single monster. Looking at the new spells, a Winged Beat of Giant Dragon is a spell which lets you return 1 face-up level 5 or higher dragon monster on your side of the field to the owner's hand, and destroy all spell and trap cards on the field. The good news about this card is that you won't be struggling to find level 5 or higher dragon monsters, as there are 10 total cards applicable with it. The bad news is that you need level 5 or higher dragon monsters to be able to use this card, which means that this card is just too bricky to be good. It's even worse given that Kaiba also has Heavy Storm in this deck, which is just objectively a better card for this deck. Double Snare is a normal spell that lets you destroy 1 face-up card on the field that has an effect that negates trap card effects. Double Snare's inclusion in the deck, let alone the anime, is a puzzling one. It appeared 3 different times in 3 different duelists decks, but was never played at all. What exactly was the goal of this card? To be the most racist Jinzo card? It's hilariously restrictive given that there's probably like 6 total cards in the anime that negate the effects of trap cards. By far the worst card Kaiba has ever used. Burst Breath is a normal trap that lets you tribute 1 dragon type monster on your side of the field. Destroy all face-up monsters on the field whose defense is equal to or less than the attack of the tributed monster. Burst Breath might sound good on paper. A chainable way to remove monsters from your opponent's field sounds pretty crazy, but when you take into account that the normal summonable dragons in the deck don't have too many defense points, and if you use it on something like Blue Eyes, you end up going -4 for a board wipe, when you could just beat over Blue Eyes instead. It's not totally awful, and has some occasional use, it's just too niche to be reliable. Dragon's Rage is a continuous trap where during battle between any attacking dragon monster you control and a defense position monster whose defense is lower than the attack of the attacking monster, inflict the difference as battle damage to your opponent. Being another piece of dragon support for the deck, it's a pretty good addition to the beatdown style Kaiba uses. Given that powerful dragon monsters like Blue Eyes or even Cave Dragon, having this card on the field along with it can take down an opponent from 4k life points even in 2 turns. The only problem is that it's kind of a brick if you only control the weaker dragon monsters, or even worse, none at all. Soul Demolition is a continuous trap which you can only activate when you have a fiend type monster on your side of the field. Both players can pay 500 life points to remove any card from their opponent's grave. Way too conditional to be activated given that there's 5 fiends total in the deck, and even then the actual effect of the card is useless against the majority of decks in the anime. Last Turn is a normal trap that can only be activated during your opponent's turn when your life points are 1000 or less. Select 1 monster on your side of the field and send all of your cards on the field and each hand to the grave. After that, your opponent selects and special summons 1 monster from their deck in face-up attack position. Player whose monster remains face-up on the field at the end phase of his turn wins the duel. Any other case results in a draw. Man, this card really is an anime card in all the best ways. Blue Eyes in most cases should win you the battle, and in the worst case, you can just use Different Dimension Dragon to guarantee yourself a draw. You could also combo it along with Crush Card Virus, which would also guarantee you the win. And here's also a fun fact I found out when researching this card. The two cards on this card are spirit monsters, which means that you can even summon them using last turn. So how successful is this new deck that Kaiba constructs in Virtual World? Ignoring the obelisk-sized hole in the deck, it's slightly more of an upgrade in comparison to Battle City. There's less hyper-specific spells and traps in the deck, even if there are a couple, but on the whole, the addition of all these new monsters are a welcome addition. There's no new cards that really stand out in any way, compared to something like Obelisk or Chaos Emperor Dragon, but definitely isn't bad by any sense of the word. On to Waking the Dragons, Kaiba at this point in the anime has lost Obelisk to Yugi, but in its place he acquires a totally new powerful card, Fang of Critias. Fang of Critias is a legendary dragon card which lets you send one trap card you control to the grave, to special summon a fused version of this card in that trap. Now, just like how polymerization was handled in Duel's Kingdom, Fang of Critias has limitless potential, as it can fuse with any trap card. This means that solves one of the big problems with fusion summoning, meaning that any fusion with Critias will be way more consistent, as you only need one trap and itself, ignoring any of its potential fusion abilities. At the very least, from all the fusions we've seen that are produced from this card, it results in pretty powerful beaters, as Tyrant Burst Dragon and Mirror Force Dragon all had attack in a high 2000s range, so an easy to do 2-card combo for a fusion monster is always a strong and powerful addition. That being said, there are 3 fusions we have seen this card make: Doom Virus Dragon, Mirror Force Dragon, and Tyrant Burst Dragon. Tyrant Burst Dragon is a level 8 dragon fusion monster with 2900 attack and 2500 defense, which is a fusion of Tyrant Wing and Fang of Critias, which lets you banish it to target one dragon type monster you control. It gains 400 attack and can attack all monsters your opponent controls. This card is pretty awful. The best thing this card has going for it is its attack, as there are very few instances where sacrificing a 2900 beat stick to allow your monster to attack all of your opponent's monsters is a good trade. Sure, if you use it on Blue Eyes it can become an OTK enabler, you'd much rather it be able to do something without being reliant on other monsters. Mirror Force Dragon, on the other hand, is ironically a much more powerful dragon fusion, as it's a level 8 dragon fusion with 2800 attack and 1200 defense, and is a fusion of Fang of Critias and Mirror Force with the following effect. If this card battles an opponent's monster whose attack is equal to or greater than this card's attack, your opponent takes battle damage equal to the combined difference of the attack of this card and each of their opponent's monsters, with lower attack than this card, and then destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Genuinely an unstoppable card, with it even itself being a game ender. Your opponent is barely going to have ways to deal with this, unless it's through monster removal, and if they do manage to summon a monster powerful enough to stand toe to toe with it, they risk their field being wiped out, or even worse, having their life points taken away due to Mirror Force's Dragon's Burn effect. The only caveat with this card being that it'll be hard to find a monster of 2800 or more attack very frequently, but if you combo along with a card like Shrink, makes this card an extremely deadly piece of removal. The final fusion is Doom Virus Dragon, a level 4 Dark Dragon with 1900 attack and 1500 defense, which can only be summoned using Fang of Critias and Crush Card Virus. While this card is face up on the field, destroy all monsters your opponent controls with 1500 or more attack. This is probably the best out of the trio, given that it's essentially a floodgate that doesn't allow the opponent to form a board to compete with yours. Now, it's not as good as being able to destroy every monster with 1500 attack from your opponent's deck, but the fact that it's a quicker version of Crush Card that doesn't require you to draw a card with 1000 or less attack means that it's still borderline broken. Fang of Critias isn't the only new addition he gets, as there's also some new cards starting with Versago the Destroyer, level 3 Dark Fiend monster with 1100 attack and 900 defense, and you can use it to substitute for any fusion material monster, and if you do, the other fusion material monsters must be correct. There's only 3 relevant fusions we ever see Kaiba use: Twin Thunder Dragon, Ixie's Dragon Cannon, and Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. There's no use with using Versago on Thunder Dragon, as any single copy of it lets you add 2 more. Whilst Ixie's Dragon Cannon is a fusion monster, it has to be summoned by contact summon, which isn't actually fusion summon, so Versago doesn't even work here. And sure, Versago does work with Blue Eyes, but the card only has one specific use in the deck, then it's not a good card. Another new Union monster Kaiba gets is Pitch Dark Dragon, a dark, level 3 dragon union monster with 900 attack and 600 defense, phase, where during your main phase, if you control this card on the field, you can equip it to your Dark Blade as an equipped spell card, or unequip this card and special summon it in face-up attack position. While equipped to a monster by this card's effect, increase the attack and defense of the equipped monster by 400 attack and defense. When it attacks with an attack that's higher than the defense of a defense position monster, inflict the difference as battle damage to your opponent's life points. If the equipped monster would be destroyed as a result of battle, you can destroy this card instead. Pitch Dark Dragon is a solid addition. Adding 400 attack and piercing to a deck of monsters like Blue Eyes or Vorse Raider is always a welcome addition. Paladin of White Dragon is a level 4 light ritual dragon monster with 1900 attack and 1200 defense. This monster can only be ritual summoned with White Dragon Ritual. White Dragon Ritual is just a standard ritual spell which requires you to offer monsters whose levels equal to 4 or more. When this monster attacks a face down defense position monster, destroy the face down monster immediately. You can also special summon one Blue Eyes White Dragon from your hand or deck by tributing this card, and that monster cannot attack during that turn. Paladin of White Dragon in a vacuum is a pretty powerful card. Being able to access a 3k beater is pretty powerful, and it also has pretty easy summoning conditions with its level. The only problem is that, well, it's a ritual monster. It's too inconsistent to be reliable, and if you don't have the ritual spell or vice versa, then the cards are individually useless. Regardless, it's still a pretty useful card, with its face down destruction effect and being able to summon Blue Eyes at any point. Charm of Lamentation is a continuous spell where every time your monster attacks an opponent's monster, and that monster is not destroyed by battle, draw one card. Charm of Lamentation is one of those cards that could be absolutely abused by certain decks. It goes against the entire goal of Kaiba's deck, which is beat down with high attack monsters, and this card requires the opponent's monster to be still on the field at the end of the turn. It does combo well with different Dimension Dragon, but honestly with the amount of crazy draw power this deck has, there's no need for it here. Tyrant Wing is a normal trap that you can only activate when an opponent's monster declares an attack. Equip this card to a face-up monster you control. It gains 400 attack and can attack twice during the same battle phase, while your opponent controls the monster. Similar to Pitch Dark Dragon, Tyrant Wing is another solid equip, but its restrictions hurt its playability quite a lot. It seems completely arbitrary to need to wait for your opponent to attack. If you have a powerful monster on board, they're unlikely to attack into your monsters, leaving this card just being dead. This arc is kind of short in terms of new cards Kaiba gets, and there's not that much of a difference between this deck and Battle City. But looking at the biggest change, the swapping of Obelisk to Fang of Critias, it's not that much of a downgrade that you might expect. Sure, did Kaiba lose an unstoppable god monster that could win the duel once it was summoned? Yeah, but in exchange the deck received a super consistent card that could summon pretty broken boss monsters. Depending on what other fusions this could make, you could even have made a case for it being better than Obelisk, just due to the fact that it's playable in mostly every single occasion, with this being the final arc in anime. And now we see Kaiba using cards in, as in Dawn of the Duel, Kaiba only has a single duel, and isn't even seen with a single new card, so unfortunately this is all we have in terms of original anime. That doesn't mean that there's nothing noteworthy with this arc, as there's a new strategy that Kaiba uses that we haven't seen before. Clone Dragon is a level 4 light dragon monster with question mark attack and defense. When you summon a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. When this card is special summoned this way, its name and attack and defense become the same as the summoned monsters. This card cannot declare an attack unless you pay 1000 life points. A pretty phenomenal addition to the deck. Being able to set up another tribute monster, or even duplicate a Blue Eyes, gives the card quite a bit of utility. Chaos Emperor Dragon, Envoy of the End, is a level 8 dark dragon monster with 3000 attack and 2500 defense, and cannot be normal summoned or set. This card can only be special summoned by removing from play one light and one dark monster in your graveyard. By paying 1000 life points, send all cards in both players' hands and on the field to the grave. Inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent's life points for each card that is sent to the grave by this effect. If Obelisk didn't exist, this would be the most broken monster in Kaiba's deck by far. Its easy summoning conditions along with the stats on par of Blue Eyes would already give it second place, but along with this effect, by itself it would be a game ender. If Kaiba managed to get the card effect off against Yugi, there would be 4 outs in Yugi's deck against this card, which he would probably still get off through with the power of heart of the cards. There's not many 1 card outs against a 3k beater, so even by itself it guarantees a 2-turn kill. In fact, it's so broken that's also one of the few confirmed ban cards in the anime, which is weird considering Crush Card Virus also exists. Spell Reproduction is a normal spell which lets you send 2 spell cards from your hand to the grave. Select 1 spell card from your grave and and add it to your hand. This card's insane cost means that you're going to go -2 just to retrieve one spell. Now what I will say is that if you're able to retrieve Card of Demise, using it this way, the card makes a bit more sense. Needing to send 2 spell cards from your hand is a pretty steep cost. It's also just a worse version of Magical Stone Excavation, which with Kaiba's resources and money, he should have been able to acquire. Dimension Fusion is a normal spell where you pay 2000 life points. Both players special summon as many of the removed from play monsters as possible. Its name is a bit of a misnomer, because it has no relation with fusion summoning. But onto the actual power of the card itself though, it's obviously broken. Potentially being able to special summon 5 monsters for a relatively easy cost is insanely good value. But again, like the other broken abusable cards in this deck, the deck doesn't really take advantage of it. There's very little cards in the deck that really banish monsters, with the exception of only 2 cards, Soul Release and Interdimensional Matter, one of which doesn't even make sense to use with Dimension Fusion. Flat level 4 is a normal trap that you can only activate if a monster is destroyed by battle. Both players special summon 1 level 4 monster from their deck. Again, it's a solid card to help set up tribute summons, get Kaiser Seahorse for Blue Eye Summon, or even attempt to complete a Nixie's Fusion. Unfortunately, from the Grand Championship arc until the end of the anime, Kaiba isn't shown to use any new cards. But luckily, that's not all the decks that Kaiba uses, as there's still 2 new movies that we saw Kaiba duel in. Within Pyramid of Light, we for once have a full confirmed deck list. As with the novelization of the movie, there also came a full 40 card deck list for Kaiba. There's a couple new interesting cards, but with the concrete deck list, we can also properly evaluate the ratios and see how cohesive the deck list works together is. Looking at the overall composition of the deck, it looks to be surprisingly solid. For starters, the deck size is 40, meaning that the number of good cards Kaiba can access is maximized. There's an even number of monsters to spells and traps, with there being 18 monsters and 22 spells and traps, which is also really key. Rather crucially, is something that Yugi's deck struggled quite a bit with. There's only 5 monsters that cannot be summoned without some setup, which is Blue Eyes, Rare Metal Dragon, and Paladin of White Dragon, and 12 normal summonable monsters. This is a pretty stellar lineup, as you won't be bricking very often with unsummonable monsters and can actually play the game, especially if you compare it to Yugi's borderline unplayable Pyramid of Light deck with 7 high tribute monsters. Makes this deck look a whole better in comparison. This isn't the only thing going for it though, as we have phenomenal draw power with Card of Demise and Pot of Greed, which means that Kaiba won't exactly be struggling with consistency. The actual monsters are all pretty powerful as well again, with high attack cards like Cluster Dragon, Force Raider, and Spear Dragon, which itself does piercing, along with Blue Eyes contribute to the beatdown style of the deck, and with most cases a clash with deck like Yugi should come out on top. There's a couple newcomers as well in the monster lineup, such as Rare Metal Dragon, Dice Feral Imp, Familiar Knight, and Pet in the Dark Clown. Rare Metal Dragon could be a pretty powerful card in the spam focused build, as it's 2400 beater that cannot be normal summoned or set, so you'll need some setup for it. But within this deck, there's only 4 total cards in the deck which can even summon this thing, so it's a pretty powerful card. Dice Feral Imp provides some recycling on flip, but given the lack of searching, sending back a single card isn't going to help very much. Familiar Knight lets each player special summon 1 level 4 from their hand, which can sort of help with a tribute summon, but in most cases you'd just rather have another copy of Luster Dragon to beat down an opponent with, rather than giving them a free special summon. And Pet in the Dark Clown lets you special summon another copy of itself whenever it's sent to the grave. Acting as the replacement for Sagi the Dark Clown, it's actually just much worse. For starters, its effect misses timing, which means that in some cases its revival effect won't even work. And the biggest reason for why it's awful, well, we'll get into that later. Overall, the monster lineup is pretty solid, even if it could be tightened up with other cards instead. But moving on to the spell and trap lineup, unfortunately many of the cards are a bit too situational. There are some clear standouts like the draw power, but of the 21 spells and traps, 10 are very situational or require setup, so many of these cards won't exactly be live. There's a couple new cards like Dark Core, Nobleman of Crossout, Megamorph, Return from a Different Dimension, and Deck Destruction Virus. Dark Core lets you discard 1 card to banish 1 face-up card on the field. This card is pretty powerful given that Kaiba doesn't resort to too many monster removal cards, so this card can remove any problematic undestroyable ones. Nobleman of Crossout lets you target 1 monster face down on the field, destroy that target, and if you do, banish it. Then if it was a flip monster, each player reveals their decks and remove any card with the same name. Nobleman of Crossout is another piece of removal, albeit a bit weaker. For the nature of a beatdown deck, your opponent will frequently be putting monsters in face down defense position, meaning that this card isn't as dead as it seems on first glance. It also removes all monsters from their deck with the same name, but with how no one in the anime wants to run more than a single copy of a card, this part of effect is useless against literally everyone. Megamorph is an equipped spell that you can equip to any monster, where if your life points are lower than your opponent's, the original attack of a monster equipped with this card is doubled, and if your life points are higher, the original attack is halved. Megamorph is a crazy powerful card. Imagine a 6k Blue Eyes, or in the case you're winning, you can even use it to half the attack of an enemy monster. Definitely one of the better additions Kaiba made to the deck for the movie. Return from the Different Dimension is a trap where you pay half your life points. Special summon as many of your monsters as possible that have been removed from play on your side of the field. During the end phase, remove from play all monsters that was special summoned by this effect. Not really going to dwell on it that much, given that it's just a slightly altered version of Dimension Fusion. Deck Destruction Virus is a trap that you can only activate when a Dark Fiend with 500 or less attack is destroyed by battle. Send 10 random cards from your opponent's deck to the grave. Despite having a virus namesake, it pales in comparison to the other cards. Sending 10 random cards from your opponent's deck, hoping you'll hit something good, isn't nearly enough to justify its existence in the deck, and there's a strong chance that this card will barely be an inconvenience at best for the opponent. That being said, this by far isn't the worst thing about the card. As you see, it requires a Dark Fiend monster, which, if you take a look at the deck, there isn't a single Dark Fiend. Yeah, that's right. For some reason, the movie writers thought that Pet and the Dark Clown was a Dark Fiend, despite it being a Dark Spellcaster, which means that not only Deck Destruction Virus can't be activated, but that Kaiba's also running 3 monsters that quite literally don't work in the deck. Oh, and another thing. It seems like Kaiba didn't understand the rules of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or he cheated. It's honestly a toss-up at this point, given that he also activated the effect of Pet and the Dark Clown when it was sent to the grave, despite the fact that it should have missed timing. But hey, who needs to follow the rules when you have money? But the most interesting card definitely in the deck has to be the Eponymous card and Kaiba's new Blue Eyes monster, Pyramid of Light and Blue Eyes Shining Dragon. To still keep with the 40 card number, Kaiba removed cloning and enemy controller for Pyramid of Light, and Blue Eyes Ultimate Shining Dragon, which is definitely an interesting choice given that both of these spells and traps are part of the lineup, that aren't incredibly situational. These 2 cards were received from Pegasus, where they were presented as god-killing cards, as at this point in the canon, Yugi had possession of all 3 gods. After the creation of the god cards, Pegasus became so fearful of the power of them that he decided to create a card that would be capable to stand toe-to-toe with the gods. The result of his fears became this monstrosity of a card, Blue Eyes Shining Dragon, a level 10 light dragon monster with 3000 attack and 2500 defense, which can only be special summoned from your hand by offering 1 Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon on your field as tribute. Increase the attack of this card by 300 points for each dragon type monster on your grave. You can negate the effect of spell and trap monster cards that target this card. You can offer this card as tribute to destroy any cards you choose. So what exactly was Pegasus' plan with this card? Why did he design a card that could quite literally only be played by one single person on a planet as a way to defeat the gods? What was Pegasus' plan if Kaiba ended up getting all 3 god cards? Why not design a card that anyone can use instead of just Kaiba? Anyways, if we look onto the actual card effect itself, there's just so much wrong with it. First off, it requires you to summon a monster that's barely ever going to see the field, and this card in your hand, making it a 5 card combo. Even if we ignore the completely asinine summoning conditions, the effect is just mediocre. At the very least, it should have 4200 attack points, which makes it a solid beater, and in a deck full of dragons, chances are by the time this monster comes out, its attack could get within the 5000 range. Its protection effect is also pretty good for the time, but when any form of destruction that doesn't target can destroy a card that requires this much setup, makes the protection effect seem that much more underwhelming. And finally, the destruction effect is also completely useless, because in the case that you'd ever want to use this effect, to sacrifice a monster that requires 5 specific cards to get out means that you are completely out of options. Even Ojamas out of all decks have an easier way to board wipe. I think the worst thing about this card though is exactly how Pegasus was intending to use this card to destroy the gods. If you want to create a card to be capable of destroying them, why give it the most insane summoning restriction? What use is a god-killing card if you can't even summon it? Even as hard as it is to get the gods out, it only requires you to get any 3 tributes on the board to summon them. With the summoning restrictions of this card, you'll be dead before you even can get this card out. Why not just make it a retrain of Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon in the extra deck, so it won't just be a card in your main deck, that will almost definitely be a dead card in 95% of your duels? Why add a completely arbitrary restriction to make it a main deck monster? The actual way it was intended to kill the gods also made no sense. Slifer, Ra, and Obelisk all had achievable ways to run it over. Given that there's only 5 dragons other than the previously mentioned ones, that would mean that most likely the upper bounds for this card would be 5100 attack if we assume that 3 extra dragons are in a grave. If Yugi had 6 cards in her hand, Slifer could run it over. If Obelisk tributed 2 other monsters, its attack could become infinite, or even just win the game at that point. Ra could gain attack of every monster attributed, and Yugi could sacrifice their life points to get to a very achievable attack of 5100. So looking at it from the battle perspective, it's not exactly like Shining Dragon has a clear edge. But okay, what about its protection effect? To be fair to Pegasus' competency as a card designer, Slifer's attack reduction in the anime doesn't actually state if it targets or not, even if the real life counterpart does, so we'll assume that Shining Dragon can protect itself from this. But both Ra and Obelisk have a non-targeting ability, which lets them destroy every monster the opponent controls, which obviously Shining Dragon is not protected by. And a final effect, which is the most egregious, as this was most likely what Pegasus had in plan to remove the gods, but unless Pegasus had hard programmed this card into letting it destroy any card, the gods are all unaffected by other card effects, so letting Shining Dragon pop itself to destroy the gods would have been equivalent of spraying a water gun into the sun, quite possibly a failure in almost every intended way. It might not be as useless as the other cards we have seen, but it's one of the most puzzling cards designed in the anime. That's not the only god-killing card that was introduced though, as Kaiba also received another card, which wasn't actually a card that Pegasus had made, but was planted by the main villain of the movie, Anubis. This card on the other hand is pretty simple and easy enough to understand. Pyramid of Light is a continuous trap that lets you remove from play all god cards on the field. In this case, simple is better than being complex, because this is by far a better card to use than Shining Dragon. It's as far as you can get for a card that is supposed to kill the gods. It removes them from the game, with no possible counterplay for the opponent. It ironically fit more with the deck than Blue Eyes Shining Dragon ever did, because Kaiba would have been able to use it alongside Dimension Fusion or Return from a Different Dimension, to summon the gods to win a duel against Yugi, and this plan would have actually worked if it wasn't for plot convenience. Overall, despite the deck list being given out, it isn't as clear or structured as you would hope. The ratios are pretty good, and there are plenty of powerful monsters to be found in the deck, but what really hurts the deck is the number of inconsistencies it has, which prevents the deck from having any cohesive strategy. Pet in the Dark Clown straight up just does not work at all with Deck Destruction Virus, which leads to 4 useless cards in the deck. Blue Eyes Shining Dragon is awful, and for some reason enemy controller was removed for it, and about half of the spells and traps are too situational. It clears Yugi's deck from the movie by far, even if it has downsides though. In Dark Side of Dimensions, which came more than a whole decade later, we get to see a massive power increase in certain cards. An important aspect to note about this deck is that it actually follows the manga timeline instead of the animes, so there are certain changes made from the anime to the movie. One of them is that Kaiba was never present during Yugi's final battle with Atem, which explains why he's so obsessed with beating Yugi in this movie. Given that the movie came out more than a decade later than the ending of the original manga, a lot of the deck has been updated to fit the times. We'll start with Assault Wyvern, a level 4 light dragon with 1800 attack and 1000 defense. When this card destroys an opponent's defense monster by battle, you contribute this card to special summon 1 dragon type monster from your hand. Assault Wyvern is a powerful card. It can be used as just a beater, and also forces your opponent to be placed into a hard spot, as if they place monsters in defense position, it leads themselves to be open for a potential Blue Eyes summon. Blue Eyes Alternative White Dragon is a level 8 light dragon with the same stats as Blue Eyes, and has the effect of being treated as Blue Eyes White Dragon on the field. It can only be special summoned from your hand if Blue Eyes White Dragon is in your hand. This is an awkward card, as on the one hand, it's as bricky as it can get for your monster. If you have no Blue Eyes White Dragons in your hand, you can't even summon it out, but in the cases you do, it's a free special summonable 3k beatstick. That also works as a Blue Eyes. It's still a pretty powerful card because of this, even if it can be potentially bricky. Deep Eyes White Dragon is a level 10 light dragon with 0 attack and defense with the following effect. When a level 8 or higher dragon type monster on the field is destroyed, you can special summon this card from your hand. This card's attack is equal to the attack of 1 dragon type monster in your grave. When this card is normal special summoned, inflict 600 damage to your opponent for each dragon monster in each player's grave. When this card is destroyed, destroy all monsters your opponent controls. Deep Eyes is a powerful addition to the deck, even if its summoning condition is a bit too specific, needing you to not only get a level 8 or higher monster on board, but also for it to be destroyed is hard enough to achieve, but at least it isn't gated to only being special summoned this way, so you can still use it like a normal Blue Eyes. Its effect is also pretty useful, in most scenarios giving you a monster with 3k attack, and its burn effect is also a neat addition. Its effect destruction effect also makes it a pain for the opponent to deal with without any monster removal with spells or traps. This next card is a retrain of one of Kaiba's normal monsters, Kaiser Force Raider, which is a level 5 Dark Beast Warrior monster with 1900 attack and 1200 defense with the following effect. When you control no monsters, you can normal summon this card without tributing any. When this card destroys a monster by battle, this card gains 500 attack until the next standby phase. A monster that destroys this monster by battle loses 500 attack. Kaiser Seahorse is unfortunately a bit of a side grade in comparison to the original card, which is surprising given that the original is a vanilla monster. It's now a level 5 monster, which means that it's yet another tribute summonable monster, which the deck isn't exactly struggling with. The trade-off of this card being a level 5 monster was that when it destroys a monster by battle, it gains 500 attack, but as it isn't even permanent and only stays until the next standby phase, meaning that it can't even stack. And a debuff of 500 attack is also too underwhelming to even care about. Crystal Dragon is a level 6 light dragon with 2500 attack and 1000 defense with the following effect. Once per turn during your battle step, if this card battled this turn, you can add one level 8 dragon type monster from your deck to your hand. This card is undoubtedly powerful given its ability to search out blue eyes monsters in the deck, and is also only one tribute for attack comparable to Dark Magician. The only issue isn't strictly with this card, but rather a growing problem which I'll cover later. Pandemic Dragon is a level 7 dark dragon with 2500 attack and 1000 defense, where once per turn you can pay life points in multiples of 100. Other face-up monsters on the field lose that much attack. Once per turn you can target one monster on the field with attack less than or equal to this card's, destroy it. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, all face-up monsters on the field lose 1000 attack. Pandemic Dragon is generally solid, but would have been much more suited to an easier monster to summon. Its effective debuffing isn't bad, as it can be used to continuously prevent an opponent from summoning weaker monsters and also allow for easier OTKs. Kaiba also acquires a completely new ritual monster, this time being Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon, a level 8 dark dragon ritual monster with 4000 attack and 0 defense. When it attacks a defense position monster, if its attack is higher than that monster's defense, inflict battle damage to your opponent equal to double the difference. The accompanying ritual spell is Chaos Form, where you can special summon any chaos ritual monster from your hand by sending monsters from your hand or field to the grave, where their total levels are equal to that ritual monster. Alternatively, you can also ritual summon a chaos monster if you control a Dark Magician or Blue Eyes White Dragon in your grave. Getting the levels required can be slightly awkward, as you'll need the exact levels, and with this deck, the only available options are by using the 4 Blue Eyes monsters: Lord of D, Assault Wyvern, or a Kaiser Force Raider with a Sagi to reach level 8. Thankfully, the second part of the ritual spell makes it incredibly easy to get out Chaos Max, which does save the consistency of the card quite a bit. Now of course, the card is also ritual, which still is inherently bricky in nature. It also doesn't have its TCG targeting protection, which means that this card in the movie is ultimately just a very big beater. A very good one at that, but nothing more than a beater, which is very prone to any sort of disruption. It can deal some immense amounts of damage, and even result in an OTK if the opponent controls any 0 defense position monsters, so it's not exactly fair to call it a bad card, just a bit bricky to fit into the deck. Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon is level 12 light fusion dragon with 4500 attack and 3800 defense of 3 Blue Eyes White Dragons, and has the following effect. Once per duel, if you have Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon in your extra deck, this card can attack 3 times. If you use this effect, destroy this card at the end of the battle phase. While this card is in your grave, Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon you control cannot be targeted and is unaffected by the effects of your opponent's spells and traps and monsters. Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, similar to Chaos Max Dragon, is an overkill of a beater. Attacking 3 times with a monster of 4500 attack means that you can deal 13,500 worth of damage in a turn and should be able to OTK your opponent in that turn. That being said, its effect is incredibly weirdly designed. It serves as a one and done card, which when you look at the amount of effort required to summon it and the fact that it just disappears after one turn is pretty disappointing. Its protection effect is also pretty baffling. It requires the card to be in a grave and only works on Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, which basically means not only do you need to summon Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon in the first place, which itself is a Herculean task, you also need to somehow summon Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon onto your field, which you know is kind of impossible when you've already used the Blue Eyes materials to summon Neo Blue Eyes. And if you look at what we know from the deck, there isn't even a way to get back your Blue Eyes not in the grave. So how exactly are you supposed to use the second effect? I mean, it's still objectively a better card than the original Ultimate Dragon, even if it ultimately, no pun intended, has conflicting effects. Before we move on to the spells and traps, one funny thing I'd like to note is that through the power of sheer will and Kaiba screwing with the rules, he somehow manages to summon Obelisk through sheer force, despite the god cards having disappeared when Atem went into the afterlife. The implications of Kaiba being able to do this, put it simply, is quite ludicrous, and honestly I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm not going to put Obelisk or count it as part of the deck, but maybe is a point for Kaiba being one of the best characters in Yu-Gi-Oh! The first of the spell lineup we'll go over is Dragon's Fighting Spirit, a quick play spell where one dragon type monster special summoned to your field during this turn can attack an additional time for each monster special summoned to your opponent's field during this turn. The movie still seems to struggle with extremely specific cards, as this is pretty much as niche as it can get. Not only does the monster you control need to be a dragon type that is special summoned this turn, it only gains attack based on the number of monsters that was special summoned to your opponent's field, which is kind of hard to do given that typically monsters are special summoned during your turn. Countergate is a normal trap when an opponent's monster with 1500 or more attack attacks directly, negate that attack, and if you do, draw one card. If the drawn card is a monster, you can normal summon it. In a deck filled with high level monsters, any card that can easily let you summon them out is nice. Unfortunately, it's heavily subject to variance and luck, given that you could just end up drawing a spell or trap. Dark Sacrifice is a normal trap and that can be activated if your opponent activates a spell or trap card that would destroy a monster on field. Then send one level 3 or lower dark monster from your deck to the grave to negate that effect. Dark Sacrifice is again a mediocre card. Having protection from spells and traps for your vulnerable boss monster is pretty strong, but it needs you to send a specific card that doesn't work with the current playstyle of the deck. Sagi the Dark Clown's previous inclusion in the deck fit given that at least you could use it with one of the most broken cards in the game, but its justification in the deck is less useful if it's being used for Dark Sacrifice. Dragon's Orb is a normal trap which if activated prevents any effects of dragon type monsters this turn you control to be negated. Continuing a pattern of two niche cards, Dragon Orb can be useful in some cases, but with how rare effect negation is, you'd be better off just not running this card in the first place. High Speed Aria is a normal trap where you can send one normal spell from your hand to the grave. This card's effect becomes that normal spell card's effect when that card is activated. You cannot activate spell cards during your next turn. From the 3 spells we've seen Kaiba use, this card appears to be useless, and would have been a dead card if it wasn't for the fact that Yugi gave Kaiba a Monster Reborn, which was the only spell that would have worked here. Even if Kaiba had more spells that could have worked in a deck that we haven't seen yet, most spells don't really serve any purpose on being activated during your opponent's turn. Induced Explosion is a normal trap which you activate when a card you control is destroyed by a spell effect. Target one card your opponent controls, destroy it. During either player's turn, except the turn this card was sent to the grave, when a card you control is destroyed by a spell effect, except during the damage step, you can banish this card from your grave and target one card your opponent controls, destroy it. Induced Explosion again suffers from the same problem that Dark Sacrifice has. The situation that's needed to activate this card is too specific for it to work, and even then the payoff is just a single popped card. Sure, the graveyard popping effect also is nice, but for that to work, you also need to get in a grave in the first place. And for the final card, we have Crystal Avatar is a continuous trap which you activate when an opponent's monster declares a direct attack. If its attack is greater than or equal to your life points, special summon this card in attack position as an effect monster that has attack equal to your life points, then change the attack target to this card. If this card summoned this way is destroyed by battle, after damage calculation, inflict damage to your opponent equal to its attack. I feel like a broken record at this point, but this card's requirements are too strict. The opponent's monster will barely ever be at the point where the monster has more attack than your life points, and even if you do, the actual monster that gets summoned onto the field is pretty mediocre. The effects conflict with each other, as the lower your life points, the lower the attack of the summoned monster, and the lower the damage dealt to the opponent. Despite Dark Side of Dimensions coming out more than a decade later after the original anime ended, unfortunately the power level isn't brought up. And even with Kaiba only being used in 2 duels, so many of his spells and traps are the most conditional I've seen, even in comparison to his anime cards. It's painfully obvious that cards like Crystal Avatar or Induced Explosion were written for a cool moment for Kaiba to counter, rather than being functionally good, which also isn't necessarily a bad thing, but makes his actual deck rather awful. The use of Dimension Summoning in the movie also hurt the viability of his deck, as it allowed Kaiba to spam out high level monsters, but given that Kaiba was using the same exact deck he was using for the actual card game, means that he was running a deck full of unsummonable monsters. Sad to end Kaiba's decks on such a low note, but on the bright side, this movie is one of Kaiba's coolest portrayals, so it's not all doom and gloom. We've seen how well Kaiba's deck works under a realistic scope, but what if I told you that even with Yugi being the better duelist than Kaiba, that Yugi's deck is much worse. So check out this video on the right where I go over Yugi's deck and see what worked and what didn't work.